like to welcome you all to the Korea Society and welcome Kathy returning, an old friend of the Korea Society, and Stephen will be the moderator. My name's Tom Byrne. I'm the president of the Korea Society. And so again, we're glad you could come and take some time from your day. To help us improve our programming, we'd appreciate it if you fill out this form. I don't think it will take too long. And also, we're very keen on inviting more people to our new headquarters. I hope you find it attractive, and in doing so, we like to urge people to consider joining as individual members if you haven't done so already. So please keep that in mind either today or sometime after today. So thanks. Stephen.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us here for noon today. A special thanks to our representatives from the Korean Consulate and Mission, as well as from the UN panel of experts, and from the United Nations Department of Political Affairs, as well as those of you who have come from business and elsewhere. We're delighted that you're taking the time to discuss a critical issue, and that of humanitarian affairs. And to help guide us through this process is our friend Kathi Zellweger. Kathy spent a good deal of time with the Swiss Development Agency effort and has been a thought leader as well as a practitioner in this area for quite some time. She also is heading a newer initiative that she will describe to you that really seeks to make a difference, especially for the young in North Korea. And given all of the time that we have spent this spring on the summit lead-ups and some of the political security analysis, we thought it more than time to bring in the idea of humanitarian affairs to talk about how things are done on the ground and to talk a bit about impact of sanctions as well. Are they impacting humanitarian efforts or not from Kathy's perspective? So Kathy, welcome back. Thank you. It's great to have you here at the Korea Society, especially in our new location. A top 350 medicine.
Right. I'm happy to be here and welcome to everybody. I'm glad that there is an interest in humanitarian affairs and North Korea. Of course, North Korea right now is Korea, I should say, North and South is in the media all the time, and we are heading for very interesting summits, and I keep my fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And just by way of advertisement, those of you who may have gone to koreasociety.org may have seen our reference to the live summit site, which is at koreasummit.kr, an effort of the Korea government to allow us a view in on that very historic meeting, which will take place on Friday. So, Kathy, on the humanitarian affairs front, I thought I'd lead and really start at kind of the essence of your current efforts and then go large on some of these other questions. But if you could guide us along with where you're at now and the effort that you've undertaken and how those of us who are here in the audience or listening or viewing online might be able to lend support as well.
Thank you. Well, I've been involved with North Korea since 1995, actually. First, running a program for Caritas International. Later on, I was representing the Swiss government there for development cooperation. Then I was at Stanford for 2 academic years. I'm still there, but a visiting fellow. And in 2014, I decided to establish my own NGO. It was quite complicated, as you can imagine. So finally, by June 2015, it was all set, registered in Hong Kong, where I have been residing for almost 40 years. And that's what I'm involved in nowadays. And that brings me to North Korea 2-3 times, or if not more, per year. What do? We decided to focus on people with disabilities because people with disabilities are in most countries at the very end of the receiving support channel. And concretely, we fund cataract operations. We work with 7 provincial hospitals, and that means I travel quite a bit when I visit North Korea. We fund inputs to produce prosthesis. Those are inputs the country cannot produce, so we are importing it from China mostly. Then we build greenhouses at residential childcare institutions with the aim to give the children better nutrition, particularly during the long winter days when they have very little in terms of vegetables and vitamins for that matter. And then the fourth project is more on the training side. In Pyongyang, there is a small center for special needs children, Down syndrome, autistic, cerebral palsy, hearing disability, and so on. And we do staff training programs there and also work whenever we can with the parents. For that, I'm lucky to have 2 colleagues from Hong Kong, experts in that field, who assist us. CORAID is very small. We are all volunteers. There is no salaries paid. We only pay travels there for follow-up visits. So don't imagine a big organization. We are small, but we are trying hard to have an impact. So that's what we do.
And let me ask you just specifically on 2 of those. The cataracts, what does a cataract surgery entail, and how much does something like that cost in a place like North Korea?
Cataract operations, let me say, North Korea has doctors and nurses who can do the operations. Some have been trained abroad. Then there is also a Nepali organization who comes from time to time and does workshops for the doctors to update the knowledge. So we provide lenses and special eye drops and medicine like that. And have a guess how much one eye operation costs for us? $10.
And the guesses were 5 and 2,000.
Yeah, so, you know, with what you spend on a cup of coffee and a croissant is for us one eye operation. And I can tell you, when you see how happy the people are when they can see again and what difference it makes, you know, because what I noticed on my last trip, on my few trips to hospitals where I also meet the patients, in our society is very often older people, or generally older people who have cataract operations, but in North Korea we also have younger, like 50s or 45, 50-year-old, and we think that's because of the famine and the long-term food deprivation they have lived through. Mm-hmm. So, you know, those people can then go back to work, or women can look after the families again, or grandmothers after the children when mom goes out to work too. Mm-hmm. So it makes a huge difference.
Sure. And really,
and the waiting list is very long. That's the other thing. We only can do operations on grade 4 patients, which means those are close to turning blind.
When I was doing flood relief in northern Peru in the early 1980s and was out with the medical unit, a doctor was saying, you know, Steve, you got to realize that not providing these surgeries condemns these children to a lifetime of destitution if they survive. Right. And there too, we were dealing with a lot of malnourished children. So really opening up a future. Quite remarkable, Kathi. As the brother of 2 disabled Korean siblings, I have to ask you, you know, we generally read that there's hard discrimination against disabled in the North. I've had some suggestions otherwise, though, from some colleagues of mine. Do you feel, is there stigmatization around disabilities? Has it gotten better or changed, or that's not the case?
I would say there are quite big changes. There is what I would call a semi-governmental organization called the Korea Society for the Protection of the Disabled. It actually started 20 years ago, and I have been in touch with these organizations from day one onwards. And they have come a long way, and they are trying their utmost, but of course needs are still very big. there are always new ideas what else we could do, but financial resources is one problem, and the other problem is, of course, you need the training of the people who look after whatever disability there is. So right now, there is an idea to look at cleft lip and clubfoot. And there are many more. I also believe community-based rehabilitation would be the way forward, because that's effective. It's cost-effective. It can be multiplied easily. But again, staff training needs to be done first.
So given your background with the Swiss effort, development effort, and this current effort, which though you have contend you're small, you seem to be having a broad impact in terms of the areas that you're addressing. How is coordination in dealing with the government there? What do you consider the levels of transparency? And you find the relationships generally cooperative, or are there challenges?
I mean, we don't work in ideal worlds when you do humanitarian aid and development, but the situation has certainly changed since my early days of working in the DPRK. And the key is basically building up relationships, and with that, trust. And once you have that and you do proper planning, that's the other thing. You have to do planning with the local partners so that they are part of the project. And then you sign agreements and you follow up according to these agreements. And so far, so good.
And in going to 7 provinces, you have fairly good freedom of access and ability
The
to
agreement is basically where we provide aid, we have access.
That's great.
And we also see the beneficiaries, I mean the patients.
Wonderful. So they're fully aware of what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
fantastic.
it's always a bit embarrassing when you enter a hospital room with, let's say, 6 or 8 people who just had a cataract operation. They wonder, what does this foreigner do here? And then my North Korean colleagues would explain why I'm there. And then usually I'm very warmly welcomed.
Very good. There is the big question then about sanctions and whether or not sanctions are impacting humanitarian aid efforts. And we've had mixed inputs here at the Society and some of our private roundtables. One longtime economist said he didn't see an impact based on the fact that rice prices were not changing. But given that you've the practitioner's experience and so many times in North Korea, do you feel that sanctions are limiting the work of international aid agencies and NGOs?
I think for us, aid agencies, certainly, because for many reasons, donors are reluctant to support North Korea, especially companies or organizations. So it's mostly private donations, and that's not so easy to come by. And then I would also say, because there is less aid going into North Korea, of course, who does it hurt most? The most vulnerable. And those who are okay, they are still poor, but you cannot take a lot from poor people. So it's a mixed bag, and I cannot say yes and no, but I do think long term, if the sanctions go on for very long, they will have an impact. And we have also problems to import goods because certain things are on the sanction list, like metal, or we don't have a banking channel, which makes it very difficult, and you don't like to take cash in. So it's a mixed bag. And I really hope with the talks, maybe that's one area which will also be discussed, that certain sanctions should be relaxed, because in principle, humanitarian aid should not be affected by the sanctions, but the reality is really a different one.
And I know your hope for that has been voiced by a number of the U.S. agencies, which have had some difficulty, in NGOs trying to adjust to the requirements now.
Absolutely.
But what is your hope respective to these talks and this thaw in relations and progress on inter-Korean front and potentially a U.S. DPRK summit relative to humanitarian aid? Do you think that you see some potential warmth in terms of providing greater assistance, or you're hoping, I should say, aspiration?
First of all, I'm very delighted that the summit is happening in 2 days. I'm also happy that South Korea seems to be a bit more in the driver's seat. Mm-hmm. And I was in South Korea just a couple of weeks ago, and I felt the NGOs I met there, they were all very willing to start programs again in the north. So I do hope that the South Korean government will look at that, because, as I said, humanitarian aid should not be part of the sanctions. Yeah. And there are areas I feel very much aid is needed. For example, the Global Fund has stopped the TB program, so over 100,000 people are not getting the TB medicine anymore, and with that, TB could really spread and have a terrible impact on the whole society. And TB does also not recognize borders. Let me put that straight too.
Sure.
Or essential medicine. South Korea is producing medicine too, so it wouldn't be a big deal to help hospitals with essential medicines. This is nothing luxurious. It's really the basic. Mm-hmm. Because aid agencies can't provide it anymore. And also the UN, I think I looked at the figures not last year, they were not out, but 2 years ago, of the amount they asked for, I think it was 140 million for 6 UN agencies. They got 26%. So, that is not a lot of money to help so many people who would desperately need help. So I hope that improves with the summits.
Wonderful, wonderful. I wanted to change tact a little bit because we often think of the Korea Society as unique in terms of a place where policy meets arts. That was part of the original vision of General James Van Fleet and the founders of the society when they stood it up in 1957. And you did us a great service here, which is you lent forward a quite amazing collection of North Korean posters that you had collected over time. I remember you and I sat at Stanford and went through the photographs and selected some tending to have agrarian focus and some of the cultural element. And you showed those at the Korea Society and most recently in Hong Kong. So we're grateful to you for that. But I wondered if you could maybe say a little bit more about your collection and the exhibitions, and what you see in terms of the nuance, the color, or the appeal in that for you.
I try. Let me say, I didn't start off as I'm going to collect posters. It was more all of a sudden realized, I have quite many. And that's when the idea came up. And by now I probably have about 100. But they are not the ones you see most of the time in the media. Mine are about culture, sport, agriculture, food security, health, you name it. It's not the political ones. And when I had the exhibition here, but also just very recently at the Hong Kong University Museum and Art Gallery, people were very surprised because they had expected something very different. So my idea was basically to present a different picture of North Korea, because I'm attending quite often conferences and we talk about North Korea when they are not on humanitarian aid or development cooperation. The 24 million people who live in North Korea are totally forgotten. Nobody speaks about them. And my idea with the posters was basically to bring that element more into the general public.
Wonderful.
And people in Hong Kong have already asked when is the next exhibition.
Oh, really?
And every time I go to North Korea, I buy a couple more if I have the time to go to the art galleries.
Do the North Koreans know about this exhibition, or?
Yes. The
Or
Consul
they must
General
be
in Hong
charmed
Kong,
by
I
it?
think he
Yeah.
actually has gone to see it.
Oh,
I have
very
to
good.
ask him when we
Interesting.
meet the next time.
Yeah, and I think it would be.
And there's also a catalog out which you find on the internet.
Sure.
You can order it.
And interesting for their South Korean brethren and those of us in the outside world too, who are trying to get a different kind of look in.
Well, and I think one day they are a historic document too.
Yeah, sure.
So I continue collecting.
Yeah, pictorial testimonials to a time and
Right,
place.
right.
Very, very, very interesting. Very unique. Thank you for that. And then you're heading out to talk from the other side at an arts invitation to speak about these issues at Stony Brook as well. Is that right?
That's right, yes. I'm at Stony Brook on Friday, where I will give a presentation, show some pictures about present North Korea, because again, there is always an image there which is very hard to say, well, there is also a different North Korea, a very ordinary life North Korea. So that's what I'll be doing at Stony Brook on Friday.
Yeah, no, it's very touching, especially since your effort really is of concern about the North Korean people, and that your compassion runs so strong in that direction. Maybe I can finish before we turn to the audience and ask you, given your decades of experience now and 70, 80 trips into North Korea.
My next one is the 70th.
Oh, well, congratulations. I'm sure that's been fascinating. What do you think from your very first journeys in to where you sit now? What are the biggest differences that an audience like ours should know about North Korea then and North Korea now?
Oh, it was certainly a very different North Korea when I went there for the first time in 1995. For example, people wouldn't have eye contacts. They would just look onto the ground, and we felt like thin air, basically, where nowadays there is a natural curiosity when we foreigners appear. And then, of course, nowadays we have markets, and market means people need money to go to the market. So there are many different changes. And I would say the majority positive. However, I am concerned if the sanctions go on too long that we are moving backwards, because it is a chain to the poor.
And I know one of the comments you made in an earlier discussion we had was mindset, too, that you see a real shift.
Yes, mindset is another M, especially among the younger generation. The youngsters born during the famine or after the famine, they have a different lifestyle because they are no longer used that government provides food, clothing, everything. So they are now much more inclined to find their own ways to make ends meet. So there is definitely an entrepreneurial spirit developing there.
Very interesting. I'll turn now to the audience, but I did want to thank you for your efforts in terms of that loan forward to the society and for continuing to keep us updated on the humanitarian issues, as well as your kindness through Stanford University. And Stanford is an organization, an educational institution which the Korea Society values very significantly. Kathi Stevens, one of our premier board members, is at Stanford now, and we've had dialogue just in recent weeks with Jiwook Shin at Stanford as well. So we've enjoyed a nice long run with that, and it's wonderful that you're there and continue to be associated with Stanford. Thank you. And thank you all. And thank you for that very informative exchange. And we're very lucky to count among our friends here at the Korea Society a number of practitioners, both from NGOs as well as for those of you working within the United Nations. So we're very grateful for your insights on that. And Kathi, thank you for your insights today. We did want to leave a bit of time for people who would like to meet you and step on up. And we appreciate your sharing really the complexity, as well as you've mentioned, and as was just mentioned in one of our last questions, real hope around this inter-Korean summit process. and it is a historic time indeed. And so we lean forward cautiously but optimistically in the hope of better things to come. And thank you for caring for those who are on the fringe and your care and compassion for Koreans. We are guided here at the Korea Society by a president who served for 3 years in the Peace Corps. As I've mentioned, Ambassador Kathy Stevens on our board, who is a noted early Peace Corps volunteer as well. And so the humanitarian impulse here at the Korea Society runs deep, and we appreciate all that you do for those in need and for sharing that with the New York audience. And please, we're very heartened by your exchange with the UN and with those of us here at the Korea Society. So thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, please, Kathi Zellweger.
Thank you.